This is a presentation for Chapter 3 on ethics. In this presentation, we'll review the 4 major ethical issues in the treatment of research participants, including potential harm, informed consent, deception, and privacy invasion. We'll also review the federal guidelines on how to address these issues. The content from this textbook and from this presentation are really important because you want to ensure that you're doing what's right for the participants and for society. So what are ethics? Ethics are standards of conduct that distinguish right from wrong. How do we use ethics in research? Research ethics are standards that apply to conducting and reporting research, especially when they concern human subjects. It's important to remember that ethical standards are not clear-cut. They often depend on the situation and are subject to interpretation. There are 4 ethical issues to consider in research. The first is potential harm. Personal safety is the right of every research participant. Harm may be physical or psychological. While in the social sciences, research is unlikely to cause physical harm, we do need to be aware of potential psychological harm, such as emotional distress or embarrassment. A second issue is informed consent. This arises from the value placed on freedom of choice. So participants must be able to make a rational decision about whether to participate, and participation must be voluntary. This is why we have protected populations such as children or prisoners who cannot make informed consent. A third issue is deception. So deception is intentionally misleading or misinforming participants about a study. So the usage is controversial. Deception is often necessary in experiments, such as the Milgram experiment on obedience in the textbook. In this case, the researchers needed to minimize reactive measurement effects, meaning that the participants being aware of being studied and so behaving in a way that they thought would be appropriate for the study. So in Milgram's case, deception was necessary. However, in Humphrey's case, where he was conducting study on male-to-male sexual encounters, he used deception, but it was an unethical reason for using deception. Lastly, the 4th issue to consider is the invasion of privacy. So individuals have the right to decide when, where, to whom, and to what extent personal information is revealed. Considering these 4 issues, there are federal guidelines that help us make the best ethical decisions in our research. So looking at the risk of harm, so we need to evaluate potential harm. The level of risk should be minimized and should be no higher than the risk usually encountered in regular life. So some studies have a higher than minimal risk. These studies include studies on controversial topics or sensitive topics such as sexual behavior or drug use, and studies with protected populations such as children or prisoners, as mentioned before. However, most surveys and interviews usually deal with minimal risk. However, if a study does poses more than minimal risk, researchers should conduct a cost-benefit analysis. This means that researchers consider who will benefit from this research, including researchers themselves, the participants, and the larger society, and whether the benefits outweigh the risks. Assessment or risk of benefits is an important first step in evaluating the ethics of a study. Second, researchers should also secure informed consent. So participants should be given enough information, including the potential risk, to make an informed decision about whether or not to participate. This is usually a document that is shared at the beginning of the study and is signed by participants. Researchers also need to protect the privacy of participants. This is possible in two ways. First, anonymity. This means that participants cannot be identified. This is the ideal means of protecting privacy, and an example would be a self-administered survey that does not ask for the participant's name. However, anonymity is not always possible to achieve. In that case, researchers ensure confidentiality, meaning that data from participants are not shared with others without their permission. Confidentiality is ensured by removing names and other identifying information from the data. Confidentiality is also ensured by ensuring that data is in a secure place, and researchers use fictitious names in reports. Most surveys can provide anonymity. However, when you're conducting an interview, you usually can only provide confidentiality. Lastly, if a study needs to include deception, researchers must debrief participants at the end of the study so that participants are aware of the real purpose of the study. To review, researchers must consider the following ethical issues: potential harm, informed consent, deception, and invasion of privacy. Furthermore, they must follow the federal guidelines associated with these four issues: evaluating potential harm, securing informed consent, protecting privacy, and deception ground rules. So who ensures that researchers are following these federal guidelines? All researchers need to submit their proposal to the IRB, or the Institutional Review Board. The IRB is a committee at nearly all colleges and universities that review research. The IRB reviews research proposals and decides whether the study can be approved, disapproved, or requires modification. This is a common procedure for research studies. This week's assignment is a mock proposal for the IRB. You won't actually be submitting it to the IRB, but I'm going to review it to ensure that you're following ethical protocols. In the document, you will assess potential harm. You will revise an example informed consent form that I will provide, and you'll ensure privacy protection by discussing how you will use either anonymity or confidentiality. So the assignment is due Wednesday, which is earlier than usual. But I'm asking you to submit it earlier because you have to submit this assignment before starting data collection. To allow you time to work on this, there's no discussion board for this week. So this is the end of the presentation. Continue to the module exercise for this week.